Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto, and it is September 23rd, year 2021. The time is 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I hope you're doing well today. Before I begin this incredible talk today, and despite the gloomy title, it's going to be an uplifting theme because this talk is going to be an homage, a celebration of citizen journalism. That's where it's at. And before I start, though, I'd like to welcome into the chat Klaus Barbie, All the Sun, Spiritual Compass. Welcome to Vovo. Am I pronouncing? I see your name all the time, or your handle. I don't know if I ever have pronounced it the same way twice. Rita Phillips, welcome. Tyrone Sargent, hey, how are you doing? Piper Fogel, Rick Olson, Michael Charlie, Thomas Maidonis, good evening. That's a new name in the chat room. Welcome, Thomas. Okay. Listen, I have a lot of ground to cover today, so let me start out by first explaining what did I mean by the opening phrase, destroying the world to save it. Right, sounds kind of, it sounds profoundly ironic, and I meant it to be so. Well, that phrase is adapted from it really, when it hit the news, even papers like the New York Times and the Washington Post and Los Angeles Times, which is my paper, they really highlighted it. Today, it might not really even gain any sort of notice because the nature of the press and journalism itself has gone so far down the slippery slope. I don't know if it's ever going to be able to pull out of it. Which means all the students who are enrolled at journalism schools, Syracuse, USC, or the journalism school at Berkeley, Columbia, absolutely, you have no future. You have no future. And that is exactly what has been planned for you all along. And the same way with I'm not just picking on journalism. I'm talking about all the professions, from the law to medicine. Definitely your professorial stratum is already disappearing. That's been going on for the past 20 years, slowly, incrementally. And most university classes, college and university classes, are taught by part-timers. Of course, whenever they get in trouble or they're arrested for some sort of Antifa hijinks or setting fires, allegedly, because the person hasn't been convicted yet, up here in the Dixie Fire up in California, they always call him a professor, but really it's a lecturer who is barely hanging on despite having an advanced degree in whatever area. So today we're going against the current there. We're going to celebrate citizen journalism, because it's the citizen journalists, when you really think about who are the people on the front lines, really, who are getting it done. And I mean in the broadest sense conceivable, getting the job done. Is it the Supreme Court? No. Is it our elected officials? No. There's certain isolated examples. For example, Governor Rick DeSantis appointed a new state, what would be his title? Surgeon General, right? Person from Harvard Medical, I believe. And I won't get into his his introduction. Of course, he was lambasted by the corporate media, the necrotic media. Necrotic means dying. Yeah, and again, it's to my point that they're on their way out. And the mainstreamers in the medical profession, you're on the way out too. That's not me. You're not going to be pushed out by people who object to your medical model, your radically flawed Rockefeller medicine medical. You're not going to be pushed out by me. You're going to be pushed out by the people who think are your allies and your friends, Big Pharma and the corporations that allowed you to rise to a certain level and build up a medical system only to push you out once it's built. You know, you're like the Chinese railroad workers. Once your job is done, the railroad's in place, then they start these campaigns against anti-Chinamen. And we still see that in the rhetoric of today, like the Chacon rhetoric. Right? So we see that process underway here. The only industry that seems to be in a growth mode is citizen journalism. And by journalism, I would also include independent film, independent arts, just call it independent arts and scholarship, let's call it. I see it in film, I see it in music and crafts persons, right? But the key word is independent, non-corporate. So you're going to walk away from Fender guitar makers, Gibson guitar, Taylor guitar. They've all been co-opted by the globalists, and they're claiming a wood shortage. So now we're going to be playing cement guitars, just like Bill Gates. I'm sure he's going to be investing in music fairly soon. Bill Gates, that's a prediction. Just like he's invested, or he, when I say he, I mean that in quotation marks, because he's not even a front. He's a conglomerate. He's a label. He's like an Annie Jacobson, but on a highly scaled up level. He's a giant entity. But yeah, just like he's invested in laboratory produced meat, right? So anyway, the origins of the phrase comes from the Vietnam War, when an officer, a field officer, was quoted by Peter Arnett. By the way, that this is in the early days of CNN, when Peter Arnett, he's from New Zealand, by the way, and he seemed to be okay, and he's long gone right now. He's been replaced by the likes of Donnie O'Sullivan, right, the prospective Emmy Award winner. But Peter Arnett reported that a American officer, major in the field, was quoted as saying, "Yeah, we had to destroy the village to save it." Now, we're talking about the Vietnam War, right? And I think it was connected to different operations. One of them is the My Lai massacre. And what that means is the killing of civilians through the Phoenix program. And that's just one of many of targeted civilian attacks. And the reason it's relevant for us, this is 1968, by the way, and the reason it's relevant for us today in 2021 is the Phoenix program is blowing back to the United States of America in 2021. As they say in old American saying is what goes around comes around, unfortunately. And Chalmers Johnson wrote 3 or 4 series of books. The first one being Blowback, right? That comes from chemical warfare, where the big danger was that the wind's going to shift and it's going to blow back on you, the person who put it out there. So that's what we're experiencing right now, blowback, if you want to use that analogy. And part of the blow, in more ways than one, is this celebrity cult led by none other, and he's in the pic there. And it's not just clickbait, but he's emblematic. I'm talking about Leonardo DiCaprio. He's emblematic of the celebrity cult, which we all know about. And so I'm not going to belabor the point. But it goes to show you, I mean, he had such great prospects. I remember seeing the independent film, right? Because independent film is going to be one of the pillars upon which American civilization is going to rebuild itself. And I think it's coming out of a genre called mumblecore. Yes, there is a independent film genre called mumblecore. And I'm going to be developing a talk on that in the future, not pretending to be an expert, but I'm in the process of watching all the film, not all of them, but many of the films, including one that was set in my hometown here of Sacramento, California, the state capital of the great Golden State. Sacramento, otherwise known as Hollywood for ugly people, including Gavin Newsom, right? Yeah, Lady Bird is the film. I think it came out in 2017. It's fairly recent. And it was written, directed, and starring a actress who I didn't know about, Greta Gerwig, right here in Sacramento, California. And I mentioned Sacramento because, hey, if a film as nice as that, Lady Bird, which I recommend, not just because I recognize the landmarks, but it's a really nice, humane film, and it's just got all those without being smarmy, without being just outdated. It's just, I don't know. You watch the film yourself, but anyway, there's hope here, And one of the great hopes is independent journalism. So yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio, I thought he was going to be one of those new faces and new talents that was going to elevate and recharge the craft and the art and the magic, really, of acting. There's a reason why people are attracted to them. The charisma and all that's real. That's a real human need and emotion and ability to have that special gift of charismatic power, as Max Weber called it. It's very real. It's universal, and it's very powerful. And you know where I'm going with this. The handlers, the globalist bankers, managed to put it into a Happy Meal format, into a can, and market it, serve it up as Leonardo DiCaprio, who started out wonderfully as a tree-dwelling, I guess he had autism or something, the younger brother of, guess who? Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp was in the same. This is 1993. What's Eating Gilbert Grape? Great film. And it was directed by Lasse Hallström. I believe he's Swedish by nationality. He's in a line of great Swedish directors, going back even further than Ingmar Bergman to the silent era, the early days of film. If I might get his nationality wrong, because I know who the cinematographer was. It's Sven Nykvist, who was the longtime cinematographer for Ingmar Bergman. So that's, I don't know. I've seen Hallström's In My Life as a Dog and some of his other films, and then he came to Hollywood and did his American film, and he did a great job on it. And I think it's because of the screenwriter and the person who wrote the novel, What's Eating Gilbert Grape. So I won't belabor it. I'm just trying to establish the fact that in the midst of all this muck that we're wading through, we're just slathered with it continually, from CNN and the New York Times and even Fox TV, and even our indie journalists are just full of just these really slick, fast-talking people whose major talent seems to be just filling up dead air, right? So it's hitting us from all sides, and I'll get into the heart of the talk today. All right. And let me just finish up with what I call what am I alluding to so far as the sixth extinction event, right? This is the catchphrase that I want us to repudiate, you and me together, all Americans, all people around the world. Let's unpack what that sixth mass extinction is all about. It's about fear. It's about the capture of resources. I don't have to tell you about this. You know about the artificial meat and global warming and the closing down of industrial capacity in the United States and other parts of the world. That's all part of the sixth mass extinction banker hype. All right. So you don't have to look very far to come up with familiar names like Paul Population Bomb Ehrlich. That was his famous book for popular consumption. He's out of Stanford, of course. And he's still publishing. Found this article. It says vertebrates on the brink as indicators of biological annihilation and the sixth mass extinction. It's a recent piece published in 2020. I thought Paul Ehrlich was dead. I thought he had gone extinct. But no, maybe he has a secret serum. I don't know. So he has some other people that he's bringing into the fold and elevating them as gurus of, and these are science celebrities, right? Gurus of the sixth mass extinction. Well, I have news for these people. We plan to be around as a species for quite a long time, right? I mean, there's always the calderas or the vaunted asteroids that hit the Earth, but in the meantime, we're just going to work at returning sovereignty to us and putting the experts off to the margins, right? Through citizen journalism, right? We're going to do away with the cult of celebrity, and we're going to do away with the cult of celebrity science, right? I was thinking about this today. I don't just sit around wondering about wonderful Leonardo DiCaprio. I said, well, where did the cult of science celebrity begin, right? What is ground zero for science, nerdo, celebrity, right? They're the new cool, is the Anthony Fauci's, the Deborah Burks, the men and the women in the white coats, right? With the stethoscope sometimes casually hanging around their neck. Where did that come? It came from, I pinned it down to Albert Einstein, right? This is before the days of mass journalism. Not really. I mean, there was journalism on a mass scale, but this is before the saturation 24-hour news cycle, CNN type journalism. That was CNN's singular innovation, is going on a 24-hour news cycle, right? Let me go into this one book that I want to spend a lot of time on it. Well, let me go into it in a moment. But first of all, let me talk about one of the first books by citizen journalists that really helped me understand the underground, the academic underground, as well as the science underground, which is synonymous, right? And I've talked about this book before, I think, Chemical and Biological Warfare by the great Seymour Hersh. He's still writing, and he's so good and so right and so committed that he had to leave the country, the USA, in order to do journalism. But he's still very much, should get a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Columbia School of Global Studies, otherwise known as the Columbia School of Journalism. 1969, Seymour Hersh. What a prescient book. By the way, the cover price is $1.45. Yeah, $1 went a long way back in those days. But he goes through it in 11 distinct chapters, and the one that's really a mind blower is chapter 8. This was the moment where I realized that the very institution that I was in, that I thought was critical of wrongdoing, corporate wrongdoing and malfeasance and structural corruption, was probably the worst institution of them all. Because everybody goes to college or university, all the science, they're all, the law schools are the medical schools. So it's really the catch basin of, or not catch basin, but it's really the point of origin for just about everything bad that afflicts modern society. So it's a great chapter. I won't belabor it. But one of the persons also inspired by Seymour Hersh's journalism, his citizen journalism, is our own friend and colleague, one George Webb, who has been just on fire for the last couple of weeks. He always is, but in a couple of weeks, he helped us to avert World War III, right? And he went there and he saw, as he puts it, the Abercrombie and Snitch crowd with their Sperry Docksiders and their J. Crew outfits, right? Do they look like cops or what? And then we just had cops arresting cops. So this is the latest book there. And I was just going through this again and just marveling at how wonderful it is as a resource, as a book, as an innovative example of journalism. And I want to thank Andy DiBala and Aaron Adler for providing the infrastructure and the labor and everybody else that's helped out and producing what I think is a landmark example of what I'm talking about today, citizen journalism. Right. So, if you don't already have the book, you'll have to get it to see what I'm saying. And it's well worth it. And it stands to me as I said already, I'm repeating myself, but it is a substantial step forward, a landmark in independent journalism. But you know what? There's a tradition in America going back to colonial times of independent journalism, from handing out handbills and printing up screeds and proposals and arguments and calumny. And it's always been a robust form of cultural activity in colonial through the Republican period till recently, really. A really robust and lively set to amongst the different factions. And that is really the sign of a healthy society, a healthy political culture, and it really nurtures the life of the republic. And I'm not going to say democracy because someone's going to put it in there. You read all the John Birch literature, the Joel Skousen stuff, who always talks about the Chacoms too, saying, yeah, it's not a democracy, it's a republic. Yeah, okay, save that for someone who cares. But anyway, here's a more recent example of independent citizen journalism. And the author is named, I'm just referring these to you, so you might want to pick them up. They're well worth it. Nancy Turner Banks, right? Also a Harvard Medical School graduate, just like the new Surgeon General of the great state of Florida. Sorry, his name slips my mind. It was such a shock to me that Rick DeSantis was able to put someone in there who's speaking the truth, right? And he's credible. They're not going to be able to challenge him. Well, they'll try, but Donnie O'Sullivan, who cares what he thinks? She's a graduate of Harvard Medical School, medical doctor Nancy Turner Banks, but with a difference, right? That was just the starting point for her. She's done, obviously, incredible amount of self-study, and she just brings it. The title of the book, I'm sorry, is AIDS, Opium, Diamonds, and Empire. She brings it all together. Yes, sir, Bob. And I guess I can read the subtitle without being dinged by TubeU, right? They like to tube us. The subtitle is The Deadly Virus of International Greed. Okay, how prescient to use that image of the V word, and published in 2010, fairly new, independent publisher. No commercial publisher would touch this, I would imagine. Although there are some that are beginning to dip their toes in the field, and it's going to make them money. And that's what it's a free market. Supposedly the model is there. And they're going to see how big this market is for for citizen journalism. They're going to understand how huge the market is. It's just pent up demand for truth, for reality. They're going to see the huge market for Americana music, right? That is independently citizen music again, and arts and film and spoken word, all of it, right? Even DJs, right? We don't need Benny Benassi or Rocky Aoki. What's his Keith Aoki? Is that him? DJ Keith? We don't need those guys. We just can set up a DJ setup in the cul-de-sac here in the neighborhood. So check out this book by Dr. Nancy Turner Banks. Certainly would like to have her on for a interview here to talk about how she, as a medical doctor, I mean, she could have, skated through as, many do. I'm not saying they're, skating, but she could have been a traditional allopathic doctor, but instead she said, oh, I'm going to study this. And it's an incredible book. A lot of it, because I have a quality audience who's done a lot of reading already, but Dr. Banks also has her share of original insights that I'm sure you'll benefit from. This is published by I'm just going through some books that were returned to me recently, and I'm so happy, to get them back and reread them. This is she's an independent journalist. It's by a commercial corporate publisher, St. Martin's, right? I don't know who they're owned by, who's owned by. It's kind of probably like the record business that's only on 2 or 3 major companies. But this book's called The Virus and the Vaccine. This is published way back in 2004. I've been on this trail for a long time. I was teaching it in class at the University of California, Davis, for years and years. And I was able to get away with it because they thought the administration and my colleagues, right, who are still teaching like 30-year-old, 40-year-old, neo-Marxist Frankfurt School stuff that, it's just sort of a recitation at this point. It's just so rings so hollow because it's dusty, it's moldy. They were teaching that, and I was trying to produce new knowledge. But I was teaching this in class, and it was so wild to even students and especially administrators that I was able to get away with it for years until they started rolling this out for reals. They just thought I was a joker. They thought I was a clown. Well, you know what? Ask clown. You've been clowned. You, Janet Napolitano. NATO, the Pentagon had to send Janet Napolitano to become the president of the University of California system in order to shut up Professor Hamamoto. That's me. And the good news is I left on my own steam, and I left 4 top-level UC attorneys in the dust. They all retired 1, 2, 3, 4 before I left. So anyway, I'm just telling you that because the truth and independent journalism will set you free and keep you safe from the bad guys. So get this. It also has a lot of mass too. So if you're attacked, it can stop, a knife or maybe even a 22 caliber shot. Who knows? Okay, this is I have a whole library of them, but these are just books that were returned to me recently. This is the pièce de résistance, right? This is the jewel in the crown that I urge you to pick up and read, because this is a lifetime type book. There's so many references in here, so much richness, that I was so happy to get this book back. And I don't know, typically I don't lend books out. They never leave my house. Don't even ask. Nobody, you don't borrow any records from me, any books. You can borrow cup of sugar or something. Oh, don't borrow any of my instrument. No camera gear. Don't even ask. That stuff never leaves. So I finally got the book back after, I don't know, a year or two or something. And you can see these are all my notes, and because I don't write in them any, I used to, but I use little stickies in order to bookmark them. And I wanted to walk us through to share this book, this incredible piece of citizen journalism. And just to relieve the suspense, I will tell you what the title is. Don't worry, I didn't forget. It's titled Lyme Disease and the SS Elbrus. And the subtitle is Collaboration Between the Nazis. Yeah. Nazis are sexy, right? So you got your Nazi fix right there. I'm being kind of ironic. Nazis are not sexy, but everybody likes to read about Nazis. Everybody likes to read about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and same on. I want to get beyond that. That's what I'm trying to say. Collaboration between the Nazis and the communists. That's another bugbear that everybody can't. We can never get enough of talking. Oh yeah, it's a communist. The communists. Okay, yeah. Tell me something new. All right. And this book does, by the way. So the subtitle is kind of like red meat for all the people who are looking for the same old, same old. But when you start looking into the book, man, it's a new world of information and connections that Rachel Verndon is putting together. It's spelled Verdon. I just checked. There's a new edition of this in hardback, cloth-bound, 2021 version. I ordered it immediately. This is an older version of it. Let's see. This was published in 2014. It's not that old, but she has a new edition, which might have some more. This is an expanded edition of an earlier edition. By the way, this particular edition, I think, is going for a few $100. When I got it, when it just came out, it was 20 something. Can't remember. Whatever it was, you can't really put a dollar value on this. That's one of the other advantages of citizen journalism or artisan type work, like handmade instruments or paintings, is that almost always it appreciates in value if you're looking to be a speculator. But I don't intend on selling this. What that indicates is the value. It appreciates, whereas most of your other stuff, it's garbage, right? You buy your garbage car and like you drive it off the lot, it's already depreciated. Not so with this. And these are books, and the knowledge, of course, and the information appreciates it in a different manner, a more profound manner, beyond money. So I was talking about celebrity, and the first celebrity whore out there was Albert Einstein. I'm sorry, well, probably in this audience, you already know that. I'm not telling you anything more. But she, Vernon, is it Vernon? She's another person. I'd like, if anybody knows her, please let me know, or send me the contact information. I'd like to find out, man, how did you do this? How did you pull it off? It's an incredible piece of research, which I'll get into it. Let me skip here to the Einstein connection. Let's see. Yeah. What the biggest takeaway that I got from this book, and I think it finally hit me just before going on here, because it's one of those ironies. Because what do you think of when someone says, I'm a pacifist, right? Or I'm a vegetarian, or I'm a vegan? That's even better, or I want to save the whales, right? Shamu. And let's have a moment of silence for, that poor creature down at SeaWorld, which is a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. How could they let that happen? Well, maybe they were involved. Who knows? But anyway, what do you feel when you hear the word pacifist? Well, that it's peaceful, it's pacific, and that supposedly was Albert Einstein, right? He was the first cult celebrity scientist. He is the eccentric face of genocide, Albert Einstein, right? We've seen the picture of him with his tongue, sticking out with his electric hairdo, right? Or riding his bicycle, just sort of larking along on his two-wheeler at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, New Jersey, also the home of the RCA Research Laboratory. Yeah, we've seen those pictures. And he was a darling of Life magazine and all the popular publications. And there were maybe a few, but like his wife, for example, but who did most of his work, by the way, or a lot of it, let's say, both the theoretical as well as the mechanical work. According to this guy, by the way, this is not me. It's a guy named Christopher John Berkness. You might want to check out his book. He's another citizen. He's, I don't know what his nationality is, but he's still a citizen, okay, but not of the United States. His work's really good. And I find my best, the most productive reading is outside of the corporate press. His name's Christopher. Let me just spell out his name real quick so you can check him out. It's BJERKNES. I'm not, because I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Christopher John Berkness, and he's written a couple of books on Einstein specifically, but his scope and his reach is far beyond that. He writes these huge, doorstop. This one's a 500-page book, but he's done several volumes, wide-ranging, a really important citizen journalist that I'm only happy to introduce you to if you don't already know who he is. But anyway, let's get back to Lyme disease and the SS Elbrus. And despite the title and the subtitle, which threw me off, it goes very, very deep. And one of the insights that I came up with early on in the book is that the so-called pacifists, including Albert Einstein, they are the most bloodthirsty of all the political cults, right? Think about it. If you want mass genocide, you want to call yourself, I'm a genocidist. No, you don't. You want to be like that guy who hands candy to a child and say, come over here, kid, you like the molesters do. You give them candy. So you call yourself a pacifist. That's the oldest trick in the book. And by the way, I bought the hype of Einstein. I grew up in that, post-atomic period, and he was emblematic of the new age of science that was going to cure all our problems, including problems of war, and bring peace to the world through science. He's the eccentric face of genocide, and he was a racial supremacist, and he wouldn't call himself a eugenicist, but I will. and other people have, including Berknes. Here's one example of it in this book by Rachel Verndon. Reading from here very quickly. Nikolai, this is one of his collaborators, Nikolai and Einstein co-authored The Biology of War in 1918. Okay, this is right after World War I, or as it was tapering off, when they really started getting the chemical and biological warfare. Nikolai and Einstein co-authored The Biology of War in 1918. Einstein contributed the introduction manifesto. I got to get a copy of this, which had been signed by a score of German scientists excusing Germany for starting World War I. Germany was preserving, quote unquote, European culture from the invading Negro and Mongolian hordes. That's their phrase, the invading, quote unquote, invading Negro and Mongolian hordes. Wow. Yeah, the Chacoms, right? They weren't, the People's Republic of China was still a pipe dream of the OSS at this time. It hadn't come into being. I'm just, alluding to our friend, the foghorn, bullhorn journalist, right, who has taken 18 months worth of research in journalism by George Webb and claims it for his own. So the invading Negro, and I guess I'm among one of the Mongolian hordes. Yes, I am. Okay. So, and then he goes on from there, right? So, point taken. Let me move on here. Reading again from page 30. The history of the communist-fascist alliance in biological warfare begins with Albert Einstein and his best friend, Dr. Georg Friedrich Nicolai, touted as the father of German pacifism. He was the theoretician of it, Georg Friedrich Nicolai. All right. Now, I don't know how she came up with that. I didn't even know who Georg Friedrich Nicolai is. I mean, citizen journalism can be so sophisticated. Not because I don't know, these names. It's just this book is chock full. It's so dense with this type of information. And then I talked about the book that they put together right after World War I. I also came across some names that I recalled from my own past, my own development, my own intellectual progression, if you will. And here it is appearing in this book, Lyme disease, in a completely different context. And the name is that of Doctor, I don't know if I think he was an MD, educated in German, right? Paperclip is just an umbrella term for a larger cohort of people who came in through the social science, the cultural sphere, the film industry, RCA research, for example. A lot of them were German emigres. This is even before World War II, well before Paperclip. And this is one of them, Dr. Frederick Wertham, Wertham. I'm sure he, at the office, just call me Fred, right? Just like all the Nazi scientists anglicized their names, not all of them, but a lot of them did, to make them, more acceptable to the American heartland. But I came across Dr. Frederick Wertham not as being this biologist who was into exterminating the extinction, right, of a good part of the human race. And they tended to be the non-white people, the Mongolian hordes, right? And the Negroes and the darker people. And of course, part of the what they call Lumpenproletariat of the European people, right? Marx was not a humanitarian. He wanted class warfare so that his elite group can be on the top, and the rest of the subhumans can just kind of fade away into the ash bins of history. So I first heard about Dr. Wertham, again, I keep going back to Bowling Green State University back in 1975, 76, and in the Department of Popular Culture. And the people there were very much, and this is 76, so it wasn't cool back then. If you were into popular culture in the academic world in particular, you were like, ugh, like, what's wrong with you? Now today it's cool because the people who are now in charge grew up with this, with the popular culture. And there are a lot of enrollments in the area, I guess, too. But I guess I'm sure they're just promoting artificial meat, GLBTQ, and some variation of Luciferianism now in the popular culture field. I don't know. But when I was there, we were studying comic books seriously because we all enjoyed them as kids. We were looking at Mad Magazine, movies, film, television, radio. There were people there who were total radio experts. They knew the broadcast date of the last show of the Burns and Allen and the transition to television and all that. But I came across this name of Frederick Wertham, and this serious biologist, guess what his campaign was in the early to mid 1950s. This is my generation, the kids that grew up with DC Comics and Marvel, and they weren't anything like they are today, by the way. They were good. And there were also some comic books that didn't have the seal of approval. I should tell you, there was a moral campaign against comic books by the Parent Teacher Association, by the churches, Catholic, Protestant, synagogues, whatever. Everybody was really scared of juvenile delinquents, right? People like James Dean and comic books and devil music, rock and roll. They all kind of went together, which is really fun, right? Scare the hell out of the older people, especially your parents. So he wrote this book, Dr. Frederick Wertham, and this is the first time I found out about him. Seduction of the Innocent, published in 1954. Right? I was barely on this earth when Dr. Wertham said, no, these comic books are doing irreparable damage to the American childhood psyche. And I figured, now I understand what he was doing. I didn't understand it in 1970s because we read the pamphlets. Oh, look at this, this anti-communism scare, and they were trying to impose their moral system. The explanations were not really that compelling to me even then, but I found it to be an interesting historical marker. Frederick Wertham and other scientists, medical doctors, psychologists. And this is also the milieu, by the way, where someone like Fred Rogers comes out of, right? Fred Rogers, as in Mr. Rogers, he comes out of that. And there was a big campaign against television as also lowering our IQ, which is probably true, but that's besides the point. But having quality public sponsored television, that was Fred Rogers, who worked with a child psychologist out of, I can't remember I think it was University of Pittsburgh. Can't remember exactly. I did a talk on that earlier. So check out the Mr. Robbers. Yeah, Mr. Robbers. That's what it was. So it was that time when you're trying to set the stage for you for the 1950s and through the 1960s, seduction of the innocent. But I figured today, after decades of study and all that, what Dr. Wertham was doing in order to attack the comic book publishers, and they were all indies. They were typically run by families. People like the Gaines family, William F. Gaines. His father was he's the publisher of Mad Magazine. He's the one that really brought Mad Magazine to its full flowering. He's gone by now, of course, but he's the genius that brought all these incredible graphic artists and writers together. And I was a Mad Magazine freak, right? Which my mother didn't appreciate, even though she'd take pity on me every once in a while and buy me a copy when I begged her at the supermarket. And William Gaines' father was a comic book publisher. And in order to escape the censorship, they had to put education. It's education comic books, right? But what Frederick Wertham did, and this is relevant today to 2021, this explains why there are gay superheroes now and lesbian Batgirls, right? Or, which is cool. It's fine. You can be a superhero of any sexual preference or persuasion, whatever it might be. But the point I'm trying to make is that the cultural engineering, the pressure exerted in order to do the cultural engineering was started by Dr. Wertham. by going after these people and taking them into Congress and putting them up there to testify in front of congressmen. Say, what are you doing to America's youth? And that scared the bejesus out of them. Number one, being thrown in jail, and secondly, being out of work. So people like Stan Lee and the guys in DC said, okay, we're going to play ball. And then that's when DC and Marvel, especially, those are the two big ones, started in accepting not the DC, pre-censorship weren't doing that, but at least they were espousing what they thought, the writers thought were American values, right? But the overt, to us at least, to children who are growing up now, it's not overt at all, it's covert. But the overt propagandizing through comics and later video games and movie adaptations started by these experts putting pressure on the comic book industry. And the same process was undertaken with the movie business earlier, when they had the Hayes office say, okay, you're not going to have this type of sexuality and no blasphemy here and here. They really don't care about morality. What they care about is you're going to work for us, the OSS, then the CIA and the corporations, to put our message out there. And if you don't play ball, you don't get Leonardo DiCaprio, right? And then more recently, right, this is where I'm leading to, the same process overtook the internet culture. It used to be kind of hippy dippy and free floating, in Stanford, what now is Silicon Valley. These were visionary people. Even Steve Jobs started out that way, I think. I don't know. Maybe he always was a phony. Who knows? But there was a definite counterculture element, or not element. It was the bedrock of the early pioneers of the computer age, of the IT age. Even the guy who invented the mouse, or I think it was Stanford. These are all like pot smoking, counterculture, rock and roll or rock listening. They'll listen to Jefferson Airplane or whoever was popular at the time. That was the milieu. And then what happened? I guess it was Bill Gates got sued for a monopoly, and he was brought in to play ball, Microsoft and all that. I'm sure from the ground up they were already part of what is now DARPA and the Pentagon. But the same process has repeated itself over and over in all the different institutions, right? Including, and we've already talked about academia, but comic books, the popular culture, and that's why you get your Leonardo DiCaprio. Now, the next wave, and it's the wave we're going through right now, you might already have picked it up, is to turn people like Anthony Fauci and Peter Daszak and all these other miscreants, Dr. Deborah Birx, and all the people whose bright, shining faces are right here in full glorious color. They're being turned into celebrities. Celebrity nerds, right? Oh, look at this. I didn't even see this. This is like a personal inscription from George Webb. It's an Easter egg. It says thank you, but it's also signed in the front. Anyway, that makes me very happy. But all these celebrity people from the science world, right? Now, who would have thought of that? Who would have thought? And you think, well, so what? It's pretty obvious, what they're doing. They're I'm talking about the mainstream corporate. They're lionizing them. They're paying them money, and they're lavishing all this attention on them. And when they have people like Jeffrey Epstein taking them seriously and allowing them to get on their private aircraft to gratify themselves at various vacation spots, right? Well, if you saw my previous talk on Anthony Bourdain and his friend Alain Ripper, a Frenchman, right? These chefs were not celebrities that long ago. They were created, they were engineered into becoming superstars. They were manufactured. And then when I went and checked in on Anthony Bourdain's life history, you find out his father was in French intelligence. Sûreté. He had all these connections in Southeast Asia, or what the French then got, the colonial people called themselves, called it Indochine, right? With the old opium, you know the story, right there. So it's not far-fetched that we would now be be in the age of the celebrity scientists, and the groundwork has been laid by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, right, and Mr. Science. Who's that guy? What's his name? Bill? What's his? I don't even know. He's not even a scientist. They're all, I think Dyson might have some background. And there's that Canadian dude, David Suzuki. Yeah, David Suzuki was sort of Canadian public television spokesperson for the sixth extinction, right? Referring to animals as a worm-like, right? And of course we have the counterparts in U.S. Public television, and I'm sure they're similar type characters, actors in all the different global markets, right? Okay, now let me wrap up here with more Lyme disease here, and I'm not really doing it justice. On the other hand, I didn't want to do a line-by-line reading here to bore you to death. But some of the main points is not only are the pacifists the most, and I will also include the so-called environmentalists as part of this group, bloodthirsty cannibals, right? Even they're supposedly vegans. But another important takeaway point is these labels between communists and fascists, that turns out to be an illusion. These labels, they all work together. All right, that's for our consumption. If you want to, you think you know about Operation Paperclip, I thought I did, to a certain extent, not at the level of an expert. Don't stop at any, quote unquote, Annie Jacobson, the synthetic author, right? The corporate author who is putting this all up in a little Happy Meal bundle so that you'll think you have everything to know about Operation Paperclip, and you won't read this book, which has much more incisive information about the paperclip scientists, who, by the way, not only came to the West, that is the US and Britain, but they also went the other direction to the Soviet Union, and they were doing the same type of work. Very similar work, right? Purposely, not that was part of the plan. That was part of the agreement on all sides. It was not seen as criminal activity by any of the parties involved. Let me see, though, if I can find some of the more interesting anecdotes here that I can share with you. Let's see here. Yeah, towards the end, they get into AIDS, the whole AIDS connection. That was in the 80s, was a beta test for what we're seeing here today. Captains of industry like Armand Hammer were Communist Party members. That part is true. The John Birchers are right from that respect, but they don't go far enough because they're part of the corporate establishment. So again, those designations, those labels, the name calling that you'll see on InfoWars, it'll only take you so far, which is not very, right? You got to get really into the facts here and the research and the documents, which this author Verndon really, through FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, she went through all this process to get articles that are not available to the public. She's still waiting for some of them. But she has enough material there to completely, from the ground up, rewrite the whole history of CBW. Seema Hirsch gave us a start. She's completing the problem. I'm not saying this is going to be, there's much more to uncover, but she's taken us much, much further than any other writer that I'm aware of. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't correct me if you haven't bothered to read this yourself first. She talks about George Merck, right? The head of bacteriological warfare in World War II. We already know that. There's some repetition, but she doesn't really dwell on it because she assumes that most people have had, the necessary prep reading here. Now, what's the main argument of the SS Elbrus book here, Lyme disease, and why is it relevant here to 2021? Well, if you've been following the great research of George Webb and others that have contributed to the knowledge, the research and the articles, and now there's tons of dissenting laboratory scientists and medical doctors who are now coming out in public. If you follow that, you understand the centrality of the zoonotic connection between humans and animals, right? Whether it's bats or chickens or pigs or ferrets, right? You know the story. But this here has a radically different approach. And I was skeptical. But after following her argument and then going through the rich backstory that she provides, the rich cultural, political history informed by documents that were held out of the possession of the ordinary American researcher through the FOIA accounts, I'm going to say I almost buy it. I'm almost there, not quite. I'm going to wait for the next edition. Maybe she really drops the final hammer in her argument, but this is a compelling one. Well, here it is, and I don't know if I'm going to do her argument justice in 3, 4, 5 minutes here. But she claims, the author claims, is that Lyme disease, right? We all know about Plum Island, right? But she's saying that the Plum Island story, even by the independent journalism, is a misdirection. And of course, the stories about Plum Island that come from the corporate press are fabrications or noble lies, let's call them, or partial truths. And a partial truth is a lie, right? But even the indie people don't have it right. Her argument is that because of all the pre-existing expatriate and Russian communities, including your white Russians, and now, the Ukrainian people, Russian-speaking peoples, let's just call them for the sake of convenience, who were in the U.S. at the highest level, including Armand Hammer and his father, Dr. forgot his first name, he's a medical doctor as well, were all very much integral to the political economic system, the communications industry, the newspapers, vertically integrated all the way. And through those connections and through retail, right, the retail industry, and we know how important the retail industry now is with the guy who ran the Victoria's Secret chain, right, and the shopping centers, the retail stores and all that. But Vernon, the author of this book, says that because of all that pre-existing network of people, foreign-born peoples who had these connections, language, business, commercial, and they were also tight with the political and the law enforcement establishment, tons and tons of diseased furs were allowed to come into the United States in certain locations, primarily the port of New York. And now, okay, we're in 2021, right? And you know about PETA, and there's a whole campaign against furs and all that. I'm not going to say whether, that's another discussion perhaps. But back in those days, furs were the preferred winter garment. Right? Maybe poor people have to wear cloth clothes or woolens or something, but for the middle class and definitely for the upper class, furs were the ticket. It was look at old 1930s Hollywood movies. They'd even wear furs in LA, which is mostly warm and sunny for most of the year. So it's a status symbol, but it also had a practical use back in the the hundreds, the tens and the 20s and 30s and the 40s. Even through the 1950s, and then there was a PETA campaign and also a PSYOP for certain. And this is before REI Co-op and down jackets and all the different miracle fabrics that supposedly keep you warm. It was furs. So the fur business was big. To be a furrier, that is a person who focused on tailoring and storing, even in cold storage during the summer months. It was a fairly substantial industry. And I don't know if it still is. It's probably contracted a little bit now, just like there are very few hat makers left. There are not very few milliners anymore. Men used to wear gloves once upon, and every man, every well-dressed man wore a hat on the street. It was a big deal when John F. Kennedy was inaugurated for president. He didn't wear a hat, didn't even wear a top hat. Like, oh my gosh, what's the world coming to? So furs were big. And tons were brought in that bore the types of ticks and other vermin that are connected with the spread of Lyme disease. And one of the most compelling arguments that she marshals for this thesis is that Lyme disease had a specific geographic focus. And guess where it was? It was around the areas surrounding the port of New York. That's where most of it, and that's where also the fur trade is, and the retailers and the storage people. That's where it had its epidemiological flashpoint or hot zone right there. So the what we've heard about Plum Island needs to be rethought, right? It might be part of the story, it might be true. Or Deer Island, whatever island it is. And it's not just about the Elbrus. It's a misleading title. It's not just about the SS Elbrus. It's about the larger political, economic, and science community, largely foreign-born, right? This is not new that we have people who are born in Iran or Brits or China running amok. So, gee, how could we allow this? This has been going on for generations now. I mean, where does the American intelligentsia come from, right? Some of them are native born. Most of them, are attracted from different parts of the world, right? And they come to the United States, and that's one of the signature strengths or the signal strengths of the United States, and positively. So think about that thesis, but even better, pick up this book, read it and reread it, and look at some of the citations here, and look at some of the footnotes, and look at some of the names that crop up over and over again, and you will have in your hand an historiographic revelation, a revelation of the method of what we're going through today, or what we've been experiencing for the past 18 months. I will guarantee it, or your money back. Lyme disease and the SS Elbrus, updated 2011 by Rachel Vernden, and a new edition, hardback only, 2000. I don't have a financial stake in this, by the way. I think this is just such an important piece of citizen journalism that has not gotten its full credit and attention. That's why I'm taking a whole hour to mention it. And by the way, I was referred to this book by someone who commented on a YouTube talk, or I can't remember, and they didn't beat me over the head with it or put some name out there. Yeah, you got to check out Fantastic Polly or Ryan Dawson, or some other person who gets most of their information from other YouTubers, right? So I took it, I followed up, I looked at it, and that's why even though I go in on some of these clowns who come into my site and tell me what I should be reading, I do welcome your comments, and I do welcome this information, because believe me, it really, really helps the effort. And I took this person seriously because she made the right approach. She said, you might want to check this out. And I did. I found it, I read it, and it changed my my understanding of the chemical biological warfare complex. The only place where she is lacking, and maybe she'll get there by the next edition, she doesn't mention NATO once. And as we know, just to wrap up, bring us full circle here, as we know, the only person that's really brought NATO/WHO into the picture, right? Cui bono, right? You remember that from the show today and the shows this week, is one citizen journalist, George Webb, the true recipient of Emmy Award Journalism 2021. Take that. I won't mention his name. I don't want to spoil this. All right. I'll see you in an hour. I'll be on the Thursday Trio. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. Bye.